Pat's Interference is brought to you by FanDuel, the exclusive wagering partner of the CLNS Media Network.
All right, it is great to be back in the proverbial saddle, the podcast throne, just what's really a spinny chair here in my office coming off of a honeymoon wedding. Everything was a 10. I first want to say thank you to everyone who sent some well wishes to both of us. It sucks to be back in Foxboro coming from Cancun, but it was good to be at Minicamp. And a special shout out to my best man, Billy Ball, who I know listens to this podcast. And for his best man speech, did an episode of this podcast actually talking about me, which was slightly uncomfortable, but he crushed it. Billy, I know you're listening to this as you drive to work, so thank you. Number two, we are recording here on Wednesday afternoon. The Patriots have canceled their final minicamp practice. They are team building. I don't know if this means trust falls. I don't know if it means paintballs, but good for them. Number three, sometime around they were on the bus to this activity, or maybe he's at home. Trent Brown tweeted a zipped lips emoji, which reminded me of all the kids I went to school with in middle school posting song lyrics on their AIM away messages because it's mysterious, it's unhelpful. But man, someone's in their feelings and they just got to let you know about it. Number four, DeAndre Hopkins is coming to visit tonight, and that is where we start with Doug Kyed of A to Z Sports, longtime Patriots beat writer, about National, doing a lot of things right now, including making time in this podcast. Doug, thank you for bearing with the intro, having me back. Don't I look tan?
Yeah, Andrew, you really do look tan. And congratulations, by the way. I know I've already said that to you in person, but congratulations on getting hitched, on the honeymoon, on being tan, all those different things. I'm even a little bit more tan after a few days of OTAs and minicamp. So shout out to me too.
Yes, absolutely. Shout out. And I love, we'll get to this more in training camp. But there are a lot of us who I think take real pride in those practice notes, right? Like it's not only just what we hear from players after the fact, and then we write stories using those quotes, but what are you seeing individually that when all of us are looking at the same thing and where those differences? So I love reading your notes, Jeff Howe's notes, Zach Cox's notes, Mark Daniels, everyone on the beat that I've been with now for 4 or 5 years. So I'm really happy to have you here to break down just 2 days of minicamp. I mean, you were at OTAs, I was not. But Belichick called these an extension of OTAs when we talked to him on Monday morning. And that was really my takeaway on Monday, is that you didn't have everyone there. It was not lackadaisical, but it wasn't totally competitive. Tuesday was much more competitive and full speed. And we'll get to what we learned from minicamp in addition to a mailbag. But first, as I mentioned, DeAndre Hopkins is coming tonight. So I want to break this down into 3 parts, because the Hopkins discussion started as rumors. Now we have an actual visit, but I think it's important to separate the kind of rumor part, or what people want to see and want to hear, versus what we actually know. So what do we actually know sitting here 12:47 Wednesday afternoon before DeAndre Hopkins lands? I would think at TF Green, probably not Logan. Either way, lands in New England.
I mean, we know he's coming. We know that he just took a visit with the Tennessee Titans. And we know, I think maybe the most important thing is that, like, DeAndre Hopkins wouldn't be coming here if there was a possibility that he was going to sign a 3-year, $60 million contract. Like Bill Belichick loves a value. And back when they attended Odell Beckham Jr.'s personal workout back in March or April or whatever that was, I reached out to someone. I was like, is this going to happen? Like, are the Patriots going to be interested or whatever? And it was like, probably not, because Belichick likes a value. And this just seems unlikely. And that was kind of the initial word on Hopkins as well, that, like, I don't know, this feels like a long shot. I think that people expected the Bills and the Chiefs and some of these other, higher caliber teams to maybe be a little bit more interested off the bat. But this is only his second visit. It's the Titans, now the Patriots. And to me, I mean, if the Patriots sign Hopkins, it's going to be at a value deal. It's going to be at a good deal. And I think that that's obviously ultimately a positive.
So the OBJ mention is a great place to start, right? Because not only is he a player who I think had a market that initially underwhelmed him in his expectations,
right,
but he probably got the best deal any of us imagine, aside from maybe his camp. 1 year, right. $15 million from the Ravens, fully guaranteed. This is a guy who
with
did not play
too.
football last year. Yes, with incentives that could take it up to $18 million. Did not play football last year, has not scared defensive coordinator since maybe 2017, 2018. Yep. And if you're DeAndre Hopkins, you were scheduled to make $19 million. No one wanted to take that on and give up some form of draft capital or some sort of player in a trade with the Cardinals. That's why he got released. But you're looking at that and going, okay, yeah, I missed 6 games because I got suspended last year. But after that, I led the league in catches. I was 4th in receiving yards and carried an offense that everyone knew where the ball was going to go. Everyone knew I was going to be isolated as the X receiver with nothing around me, and I still produced. I should get more than that. And yet, as you very astutely mentioned, that's not going to happen here in New England. Maybe in the neighborhood of 1 year to $15 million as we kind of transition here from what we know to what we expect, because I'd expect the Patriots to have several coaches involved with this visit. I would expect, as you just mentioned, I think Ian Rappaport had done too, that, you know, he's not coming unless they've discussed terms, whether they're in a wide range or a narrow one, because Hopkins' market obviously has shrunk a little bit. Like, I don't think he came from Tennessee with an offer. Mind you, why would anyone want to go to Tennessee now if not just to gorge on fried chicken, or hot chicken, I should say, because that team is going to stink. It doesn't have a very good quarterback, probably not an elite defense, strong management, sure. And those were the boxes that DeAndre Hopkins last mentioned of things that he wants. What are his next visits? No one really knows. Beyond that, what do you expect from the Patriots to do, either as a pitch or maybe in a range of figures with the contract offer, to happen here in the next 24 or so hours?
Well, I think it's pretty easy to add incentives to DeAndre Hopkins' deal. And maybe that's something that's been a little bit under discussed, but just the fact that he did only play, 9 games last season, 700 something yards, like his numbers were way down last year because he missed time with the PED suspension and with the injury. So it's very easy to bake in not likely to be earned incentives that would allow the Patriots to sign him to like a pretty low base deal. I think Albert Breer, you were on with him on NBC Sports Boston. I think Albert Breer mentioned like somewhere in $8 to $10 million range for DeAndre Hopkins on a base deal, but then you can bake in incentives. And I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't be shocked. Well, the Patriots have about $14 million in cap space right now. I wouldn't be shocked if they, included incentives that could like double the deal. That's what they did with Mike Gesicki. So I don't know if it's like an $8 million deal or $9 million deal that could be worth 16 or 18 million. Wouldn't necessarily shock me, just because that would allow them to sign him within the salary cap, not commit to too much, base it on his performance. But I do think that one of the most important things here is that I think he has to make more money than Juju Smith-Schuster on a per year deal, because for years and years and years, the Patriots wouldn't sign a wide receiver that was making more than Julian Edelman. And Julian Edelman always signed these like team friendly deals that were really low. And that kind of hamstrung them to a certain extent. I guess even with Brandon Cooks, I guess that was kind of a different situation, because you could argue that Brandon Cooks was a better receiver at that point than Julian Edelman. But I think that when DeAndre Hopkins comes in here, he's going to be the best wide receiver on the Patriots, and you don't want to be paying him less than Juju Smith-Schuster. So I do think that somewhere in that $8.5 to $9 million range is probably the floor for DeAndre Hopkins coming in on a base deal. Then, like I said, you could bake in those incentives. But I don't know. I think that that's probably the appeal, playing for Bill Belichick, getting a deal that could be worth a lot of money, and having a lot of opportunities, because this is an offense that certainly needs a player like DeAndre Hopkins. I think this is kind of an aside, but the Ravens are probably going to look like idiots after this DeAndre Hopkins deal.
Because, I'm really glad you said that. Yeah.
In no way whatsoever would you rather have Odell Beckham Jr. than DeAndre Hopkins, right? Like they're I think 4 months apart in age, which seems kind of hard to believe. Odell Beckham Jr. hasn't played a full season since 2019. DeAndre Hopkins hasn't since 2020. Like Odell Beckham Jr. did not play last year. DeAndre Hopkins looked pretty good when he was out there. In no world should Odell Beckham Jr. be making more money than DeAndre Hopkins. And I think that that's the way that this is all going to shake out.
Going back to OBJ really quickly, as I checked in that as well and didn't even bother. I might have discussed it in a previous podcast, but the response I got was, you're asking me if we have interest in the guy with 2 torn ACLs who's going to turn 31 this year.
Right.
I said, yes, no response. So we're on the same page as far as their level of interest there. The other part about this, though, is, and I mentioned when this first came up, that I didn't expect the Patriots to have much interest, not only just because of the dollar figures, and the cap hit and giving up an asset on top of that. And things have worked out for them. The market has waned. Even the Chiefs and Bills who had interest have fallen out, given money elsewhere. The discussion and interest from the Patriots perspective, I think, has really picked up in recent weeks, because again, in March and April, for all the reasons I just mentioned, they were out. They said, you'll come to us if this really needs to happen. And the whole league was doing that with the Cardinals as well. And the only team that I heard DeAndre Hopkins was willing to take a pay cut for was the Cowboys. And we know, of course, went out and got Brandon Cooks because they didn't see Hopkins as good value. Now, the cap and the cash, I think, is secondary, because you mentioned they have about $14, $15 million in space. The Patriots continue to rank among the lowest spending teams in the entire league. They can fit this under the cap, spend more cash if they want to. Robert Kraft has at least said to the media, cash is not an issue. I'll give Bill whatever he wants. The money does matter, though, in the sense that it means influence. This is a guy and where I think some of those incentives might come into, not just, hey, we'll give you an extra grant. it's chump change. We'll give you an extra $1 million if you get to 1,000 yards. We'll give you an extra $2 million if you get to 1,200 yards. How many times do you practice? Because this is something that, I'll be honest, I didn't know as much about until recently in reading pieces from Albert Breer in 2020 after Houston and Bill O'Brien traded Hopkins to Arizona. You know, of course, all the stuff starts to come out. This is why we do it. The league is laughing at us. This is why it was a good deal. Practice was a big sticking point. You go ahead the next couple of years to the Cardinals. He's getting veteran rest days left and right, free candy, basically, to them. And I remember even before the Patriots came on Monday night going, is something wrong with him? I was like, no, he's just hanging out. Cliff Kingsbury is very hands off. So that will be interesting to me. It's not only just about the money, how much is guaranteed versus tied to incentives. Is there a way to get creative? Because we know this front office will get as creative as they need to be, and maybe as creative as any other team in the league to make this deal possible. And that's why I think there's hope here. I'm not here to put a percentage, because then we'll get to what do we guess happens here in a second. But the last thing I'll say is this. I think the Patriots would love to do a one-year deal, incentive laden, to make it happen, where they could maybe meet in the middle with Hopkins to say, you can go out and tell the world, okay, I still got made whole here instead of the $19 million. I'm averaging about 18. Make it a 2-year contract that's backloaded. And so in the front part, the first year, you get 10 to 12 mostly guaranteed, but in the back end, that gets closer to 20. And the Patriots could kind of have an out there. And there is precedent for this, something I mentioned on TV the other night, when they bought low on Darrelle Revis coming from Tampa after an ACL tear and said, we'll still technically make you the highest paid corner in the league, which I don't think Hopkins wants to be as a receiver. But we are going to get out of the Darrelle Revis business after 1 year, and you will get that money elsewhere. And that is where I think there might be a sweet spot here, depending, of course, how do the conversations about practice go, which is absolutely going to come up. And then what is the middle ground they can strike on incentives versus program roster bonuses and guarantees.
Yeah, because with Revis, I think it was like actually a 1 year, $14 million deal, something like that. I don't know what the terms were over 2 years, but yeah, it was basically like, this is a 2-year contract. It's a very high amount, but it's, you get out of it after the first year. So yeah, that's actually a good idea. I was thinking about tacking on like void years or doing something that was backloaded on a multi-year deal. But that's an interesting idea where it's like, yeah, it's going to be announced as like a 2-year, $45 million deal or something like that. When in actuality, it's like a 1 year, $8 million deal with a bunch of incentives. One other thing I just want to toss out there, because we talked about Juju. Do you think that, I guess that would fix it if they were to announce it that way, or if that's the way that it's reported and that's the way that it's structured. But does Hunter Henry's deal play into this at all, where his APY is, I think, $12.5 million? Like, do you want DeAndre Hopkins making more than Hunter Henry on a per year basis? Or since they play different positions, does it not matter? I kind of go both ways with it. I know that's not like the most interesting way to handle it, but I don't know. It does feel a little weird if DeAndre Hopkins makes like, I don't know, he's like a 1,200 yard receiver this season, and it winds up being like a 1 year, $8 million deal with incentives, or 1 year, $9 million deal with incentives, if Hunter Henry's making more money than him. I don't know. Does that play into it at all?
Yeah, I think it's a good point, because it gets back to something I mentioned and forgot to expound upon. But let's start here. DeAndre Hopkins is a much better player than Hunter Henry. Okay. Right. And Hunter Henry had a very, down year statistically last year, and I think got the shortest end of all the very short sticks that the players were handed under Matt Patricia and Joe Judge, where they're asking him to stay in pass protect, and he only goes off against Minnesota and just has the worst year of his career, save for his rookie season. But that is a guy that, despite all of those statistical lows and bad moments and not getting the ball enough, that went to the podium and talked to the media week after week after week and was bought in. Okay. Right. You didn't see a drop off in effort from him.
Yeah.
And if DeAndre Hopkins gets more money, because every single person in that locker room is going to know how much money he makes, just like they know Matt Judon is the highest paid defender in Patriots franchise history, and people follow him along, not only because he's a 3-time Pro Bowler and the guy's a ton of fun, but people want to get paid too. So maybe I should work and act like Matt Judon. if DeAndre Hopkins makes more money than Hunter Henry, he'll have a little bit more influence, not only because of his reputation, but that salary.
Right.
And if it comes around to week 11, and this is what the Patriots are now processing and playing out and gaming out internally, and we need him to practice, and he's on the fence, and he says no, what does that do for anyone else as the stakes get higher and we go deeper into the season for anyone else who finds themselves in a similar situation, whether it's Kendrick Bourne or Devontae Parker or Mike Gesicki, because Hopkins will have sway and influence in that locker room that is directly correlated with his contract. And that's where the money matters more so than I think cap or cash. But I to directly answer your question, yeah, I think you have to make him higher than Hunter Henry. But that's the risk that Patriots are weighing and assessing, because it's very, very real. And it's easy to talk in June of, I'm committed, I'll practice, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
These are hard practices in New England. This is going to be a little bit of a shock, even for a guy who played under Bill O'Brien for most of his career.
Yeah. I also think that, I mean, maybe with Tom Brady at quarterback, that doesn't matter as much when they're winning Super Bowls year after year after year and everyone's buying in and everything. And you've got, Devin McCourty and like all these team leaders, or go back and Teddy Bruschi, all these guys. Right now, I mean, I don't know what you made of it, but when Kendrick Bourne is talking about, I don't even if you saw the quotes, because I think that you're coming back from the honeymoon, but like when Kendrick Bourne is talking about the new offense and like sort of indirectly comparing it to what was happening last year, when Mac Jones is even saying that, like, yeah, I talked to Bill O'Brien about the offense, I talked to Bill Belichick about the defense, the thing that he really knows about, the thing that he really specializes in, like all of these like little comments that in the past would be seen as maybe innocuous, like Bill Belichick is still the guy who put Matt Patricia and Joe Judge in charge of the offense. And if guys are kind of making comments where, like Mac Jones was saying that, yeah, now it feels normal with Bill O'Brien as the offensive coordinator, like maybe they're not digs at Bill Belichick, but they're kind of digs at people that Bill Belichick trusted to run his offense. And I'm not saying that that's like him losing the locker room or anything like that, but they are things that you have to consider when you are bringing in a guy like DeAndre Hopkins, of, like you mentioned, like, is this guy going to practice? How is Tyquan Thornton going to be responding to, well, the top player or position isn't practicing, so why should I? Or like, I think that it all stems from leadership. And I certainly am not going to say that Bill Belichick is losing the locker room by any means, but it feels different. There are different things going on right now. And I don't know, these comments you need to read into them a little bit more.
You're absolutely right. And things are different. 25 and 26, the last 3 years, not a single signature win. And if you want to make the case for one, you could either go to a windstorm win at Buffalo on Monday night in a game that you could not possibly replicate that game environment and circumstances, or another rainstorm at home against the Ravens in 2020 in the miserable COVID season. That's it. This is the team that is underachieved. And so Belichick needs to nurture and rebuild part of that culture. This is not some sort of nebulous idea that, you hear a lot of coaches talk about, we're going to rebuild the culture and build it back up and all these different things. Culture is day-to-day activity and attitude and routine and habits. And the habits were poor there. And you're either coaching those things or you're letting them happen. As I said, after Joe Judge had his infraction with those special teams meetings that cost them OTAs, it falls back on Belichick. And we've listened to too many Mac Jones press conferences at this point, given his relationship and what it was with Bill Belichick last year, not to take those comments as a little sideswipe. So you're absolutely right. And that's the material impact of culture in a guy who you need to bring in, but you need to get that buy-in, because if they do, and you're pretty much buying low on DeAndre Hopkins as much as the numbers haven't cratered in the way, or a guy who missed a season due to injury, that you would traditionally buy low on a player. But the market has told him you're worth less than what you think. If that sinks in for him, he'll fall right in line with the rest of the offense, which I look at and see the theme of this year for them is just prove it. Mac Jones, prove you're a franchise quarterback, more of a Dak Prescott who had a bad year 2, bounce back to year 3. Can lead a team to the playoffs after a stellar rookie season. Prove it, Bill O'Brien, that you're ready to be a head coach again. Guys in contract years, Hunter Henry, Devontae Parker, Kendrick Bourne, all of these different players, prove that you're better than last year. DeAndre Hopkins, prove you're still a number one. Okay, let's wrap with this. What do we guess? We're not reporting. We are not predicting. We are guessing here on a podcast that happens by the time Hopkins leaves, presumably on Thursday. All right, football season still a couple of months away, but baseball season is in full swing, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's 1,000, $1,000 back in bonus bets. If your first bet doesn't win, you win if you lose. Just go to FanDuel.com/Boston to join today. This could be if you're a Red Sox fan. If you're not, if the Sox are losing, bet on them to come back as the game is going on. Or if you like Rafael Devers or Adam Duvall to hit a home run, you can bet on that at FanDuel. Just don't miss out on the chance to snag a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Again, that's FanDuel.com/Boston to sign up. FanDuel, the official partner of Major League Baseball. Major League Baseball trademarks are used with permission.
I mean, I don't know when the last time the Patriots brought in a high-profile free agent, like on a visit, and didn't sign him. So I lean towards them signing him. I lean towards something getting done. It's kind of good timing now with minicamp over too, because DeAndre Hopkins wouldn't have to participate in minicamp. You kind of know where he is. No pressure on him over the next 5 weeks to figure out where he's going to wind up. I mean, I know that the Patriots have a serious interest. They wouldn't have been bringing him in otherwise, but I have been told that that's, very serious. They don't necessarily view him as like a top 5 wide receiver at this point, but they certainly think he's still a good player. They think that he can certainly help the offense. And this is my opinion that he would be the best pass catcher on the team. So
yes,
I think they get it done. And I actually do like your idea of, sign him to a 2-year deal, make the APY look really high. That solves the issues of him not being the highest paid player on the offense or whatever it is, but then also have a very clear out after year 1 that you're not going to pay him for that year 2. It's going to void, or it's going to be either going to release him, whatever it's going to be. So I don't know what that figure is, but I think that for this year, the actual money, I'm guessing, would be around $9 or $10 million.
That's really interesting because, well, first, can I get you a percent for the people? It sounds more likely than not. Can we get like a 50.1%, a 51%? Again, no one's holding you to this, and I'm speaking for every listener because somehow I will hold them accountable. But
I mean, sometimes I will do like the 51%, but I feel like that's kind of a cop out in this situation. I don't know. I'm certainly there's certainly a possibility that I'm going to be wrong, because DeAndre Hopkins, like, you need, both parties have to agree to it. The Patriots can't just decide to sign a guy without him agreeing to it. And I don't really know where DeAndre Hopkins lands on all of this, but I don't know. I put like 55, 60%. That's wow. I guess where I would go. Just because I do think it's going to happen. So, and I don't want to do the 51%. So that's where I'll go. What do you think? What's yours?
I'm about 30 to 40%. I think, again, complete guess, gut feeling. We talk to different people, but it's hard to get a sense of what hard line stance, if any, DeAndre Hopkins is going to take when it comes to the guaranteed money, his role. And then what is the Patriots pitch? Because the intensity of their pitch, I think, has to be much higher than it would have been 3-4 years ago. Yeah. Tom Brady's here. Look at the rings, the trophies. Do you want one or not? That was the pitch. It spoke for itself. Now I think you need to massage the messaging a little bit more and play to him. Is Belichick up for that? Is Bill O'Brien up for that? Are they willing to tweak a system that you just very recently and freshly installed with, most of the rest of your offense to accommodate what would absolutely be the best pass catcher on the roster? Yeah. I don't know the answers to those questions. What I do know is that DeAndre Hopkins wants a lot of money, and he should. He's an extremely valuable football player in the back end of his prime who would help out a team a whole lot. So I would say 30 to 40%. Part of this is I also think he'll leave Thursday without a deal done. Like, I think he would have to be blown away by the pitch or the money, which I have a hard time seeing the Patriots, offering, the Odell Beckham deal or anything similar to that in terms of guarantees. But it also behooves him to leave, right? Like, if he's making this free agent tour, the more offers you get, the more teams that you see, that's more interest. And there are no more practices to go to until late July with training camp. So maybe sign in a week or two, get the playbook, and then kind of hang out. But I would guess closer to July, maybe a throwing session with Mac Jones if it does happen. And I think ultimately with the other teams that will probably offer more money, that's why I'm more in the 30 to 40% range. But that's higher than I've been the entire offseason. The last thing I'll say is this. As we went way longer on this than I expected, we're going to get to minicamp, I promise. Though I think people might just.
This is important.
This is important. This is bigger than anything in minicamp. The $9 to $10 million you just threw out is really interesting to me because Nelson Aguilar I think still is the bar in terms of
right.
APY for receivers. 2 years, $22 million, $16 million guaranteed. That was 2
Right.
years ago for Nelson Aguilar. Okay. Juju Smith-Schuster got 3 years, $22.5 million, 16 guaranteed. It seems like that's the soft ceiling. I think they would go above that a little bit, but not 15 guaranteed, not for 1 year. APY though, 12, 13. I think that's more in their sweet spot, but that's where there's going to be a little chicken. That's where the negotiation comes in of we'll do a little less than Tennessee.
Right.
But you want to come here more than you want to go play for the Titans and go 4-13. So
yeah. And I mean, you could even structure it, not to, this is my last point as we do get into minicamp, but like you could even structure it where you can guarantee him 14, $15 million, whatever it is, but like some of that hits next year's cap. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't all have to be on this year's cap. So like I don't know. I think there are creative ways that they could structure it.
Yeah. The money matters in the sense of the influence it's going to carry in the locker room, the confidence you have in the player that he's going to fit. It's not a matter of Robert Kraft's pocketbooks. It's not a matter of cap space. And this is someone who has said many, many times the cap is not crap. They can get creative. They can make this work. But you want to be careful about the message you're sending to him and the message you're sending to the locker room. And that is what's weighing heaviest on their minds. Okay, minicamp. 2 days, no concerns about the Patriots canceling the third day. They do this very frequently. Yeah. Even when they lose 2 OTA practices, it's a sign of mission accomplished to Bill Belichick. Good, hard work, productive series, all the way dating back to their initial workouts. We're going to go offense, defense, and then rookies and winners and losers and get to the mailbag. So the offense, I wrote Bill O'Brien's base stuff with something to watch for us. What are the things they keep going back to? That's going to show us what this offense is about. It's difficult to say because Juju Smith-Schuster was out. Tyquan Thornton was out. There was no Trent Brown. So what we saw was 12 personnel, 2 tight end package. Virtually every single snap that Mac Jones was out there. Hunter Henry and Mike Gesicki, of course, followed by Devontae Parker and Kendrick Bourne with Ramondre Stevenson. I don't believe this is going to be a 12 personnel offense. I could be wrong. The question is going to be, do you like Mike Gesicki in the field more than a Kendrick Bourne or Devontae Parker as your third receiver, maybe Tyquan Thornton? They don't know the answer to that question yet. Aside from that and the personnel, what did you see from the structure, the play design, the organization, the time and the cohesion that stood out?
I mean, it looked a lot more structurally sound than it did last year at this time. I think that, Mac Jones looked good in the offense, but I also thought that Mac Jones looked good last year around minicamp and OTAs too. So I hesitate to say too much about his performance, but I do think that he's in a much better system, obviously now with Bill O'Brien. The personnel grouping thing is interesting to me because I thought Mike Gesicki looked really good in practices. And like, if you don't bring in DeAndre Hopkins, I probably would put Mike Gesicki above like the Kendrick Bourne or Tyquan or Kendrick Bourne or Tyquan Thornton type players in the offense. Like, I think that I don't think he's going to be playing 100% of snaps. I think that he's a guy that you have on the field like 50 to 60% of the time. But I do think that there's a spot for him in this offense and that like he's going to be playing a lot this season. As far as what the offense was doing, it looks like there's going to be some creativity. Like you already saw them working on, some motion, some kind of like a couple pop passes. They were using a couple different players in those types of roles.
How many screens do you think we saw? And I don't mean to give the folks, we need an acronym for this because it's not PTSD, traumatic, right. But like PSSD, like post 22 season stress disorder. But the screens I'm alluding to are very creative, a lot of different fakes, directions. But that was almost all Monday, yeah?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we saw a lot of screens. Obviously, since this is minicamp, we didn't get a good sense of like what the running game is going to look like. Really, they did very little running, especially in the team drills. But no, I think that it's probably not going to be the most creative offense in the NFL. It's not going to be like, but I do think that I don't know. I just go back to like what players were saying. It seems like everyone's just buying in so fully on Bill O'Brien, like Mac Jones, Kendrick Bourne. Mike Gesicki, Hunter Henry, like all these guys are just raving about Bill O'Brien in this offense that I don't know. I've got some pretty high hopes for it. I know that it didn't always look the best during minicamp, but it certainly looked so much better than it did last year.
Right, which is what you want to see. I mean,
Right.
just some sort of level of competency and organization. I think there will be a honeymoon period probably afforded by media and fans, right? The first couple of weeks of training camp. But last year was such an utter and complete disaster. And I'm I've only been covering the team then going on my 5th season, now 6th. This is the worst practice I've ever seen. Right. This is alarming. This is a problem. We won't see that, which will look and feel like progress. But come the second preseason game, maybe third, I think that's when you need to show us a little bit more. Right. But the trouble with this is they're going to slowly find out what they can and can't get away with during joint practices with the Packers.
Yeah.
And then I'm missing one session. Is it the Texans, or they have one more at the end that now?
So the Titans, right?
Yes, the Titans.
Yeah.
And that has a lot to do with their offensive line, where the other big takeaway was Trent Brown not being there on Monday. Mark Daniels reported that his flight got canceled due to a hailstorm in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And so he showed up Tuesday, warms up, positional drills, and they say take a hike. He went down a lower conditioning field. Whether this was the team being mad at him for not making a mandatory practice, he's not in condition, he's not fully healthy, we don't know. But he was there, and in his place at left tackle was Calvin Anderson. Okay, ideally a swing tackle. Right tackle was Connor McDermott, signed off the Jets practice squad last November. And then the backups were Riley Reif at left tackle and Sidy Sow at right tackle, a position he has not played, a 4th-round rookie since 2018. This is the state of the Patriots tackle depth. And if you can't protect, there goes your downfield passing game. You might be able to get things off of play action, which I think they will try. And we saw some of that. And it's going to look like the actual runs that they call and execute. But the tackle depth is something that's already worth monitoring. Yeah. Even at a time before they put the pads on and you see a real life pass rush and running drills.
Yeah, I don't know how they really allowed it to get to this point. I mean, like the Riley Reif thing was interesting because he was in that starting spot during OTAs. I'm not sure what happened between OTAs and minicamp that kind of thrust him into that backup role, but not ideal to see. And no, I mean, you don't want Calvin Anderson to be your starter. You certainly don't want Connor McDermott to be a starter.
I would love Calvin Anderson to handle a Rubik's Cube constantly in front of me, because that dude does it with behind his back. And I guess you don't need your eyes closed when something's behind your back, but I think he's done it before. And he's amazing in certain senses, but you're right. Swing tackle is the goal here, I think, with Calvin Anderson.
Yeah, and McDermott, totally fine as your 4th tackle, but like you still do need those starters in there. So I don't know. I mean, Trent Brown was probably like one of the losers of training camp just because he showed up late, didn't really do anything. But like, I mean, he can just go to the Patriots and be like, what are you guys going to do? Start Calvin Anderson and Connor McDermott? Like, I have to be out there. I'm one of your best tackles. So you're stuck with me unless you make a trade or unless you make a signing. There are still some veteran tackles out there. So I know we'll get into this maybe a little bit later, but like there are other options that the Patriots could take here. But I think the fact that they did what they did early in free agency, didn't show any interest in doing anything in the draft or later on, that they clearly believed that this was the solution at tackle. Now, maybe given what we were seeing from Riley Reif being more of a backup in there, maybe they could have some second thoughts at this point.
Yeah. And I want to move on to quarterbacks, then we'll close and go to defense. But one more name I'll throw out for the offensive line, and Mike Onwenu did not start, so he'll be back in there. That's a guy who could theoretically play right tackle if you need it, but they really want to keep him at guard. Jake Andrews, their first pick on day 3 out of Troy, got some starting reps at center for half of a period in 11-on-11s yesterday, meaning Tuesday, and at right guard. And I'm not saying he's supplanting David Andrews and moving into right guard, but it shows you a level of trust there with him, whatever he's shown in OTAs, in classrooms, or rookie minicamp, to say, we'll give him a shot. And I would expect that to continue here moving forward. What does it ultimately mean? Probably not more than he's going to be the backup center, which you would expect anyway. Given the draft pick they invested in him and the need there, but it's someone that they clearly have a little bit of belief in already. Quickly,
can I jump in there just really quick on that? I actually took it another way because so early on in OTAs, it was Bill Murray in that right guard spot. And then after that, it was Antonio Mafi in that spot. And then he started wearing a red non-contact jersey, so he kind of got taken out a little bit. So to me, it was almost like Jake Andrews was like the third option to be plugging in there at right guard, rather than, because I was a little bit surprised. It's like, well, he was drafted higher than Antonio Mafi. He wasn't a defensive tackle convert like Bill Murray was. So I mean, I would also say about Jake Andrews, maybe they do have faith in him. Maybe the fact that he was there at the end is a sign of trust in him. he just looks so small, even compared to David Andrews, who's like an undersized center at right guard. Like he's like 6'2", 6'3", 300 pounds. I know that Cole Strange was undersized last year by a weight perspective, but at least he's like 6'5", this towering guard. Like Jake Andrews just looks really small playing in like a one-two spot. He's probably like, what, 50 pounds lighter than him or something?
Yeah.
So even if like one option was to move Michael Wenu to right tackle, then you're talking about, okay, do we plug in Bill Murray? Do we plug in Moffey? Do we plug in Jake Andrews? There's not that like one, okay, 100%, we've got a great guard to plug in there and we can move Owenu. I'm not sure if that's an option right now.
And Moffey would still be my bet to win that job as a guy who changed positions in college. He just has the raw strength. You don't need him to move a ton, play at a higher level of competition. I was down on the Jake Andrews pick, I think more than any pick maybe that they made, aside from Amir Speed, but then you get to the 6th round, no one really cares. So yes, it's a good point. And Moffey did get first team reps at left and right guard, very, very sparingly, but over Monday and Tuesday. So everyone's kind of in the mix there. It's a good point. I think as far as security, job security, making the final cut in the roster, it would still probably go Andrews and City Sal, given how many snaps Sal is taking a tackle. But Moffey, he's still developing, even though he's a highly experienced player, which you don't get a whole lot. Forget that he's just strong as hell. All right, so now quickly, Mac. We both wrote this up. We had the stats that were charted, the competitive drills, non-competitive drills. Anything stand out to you about him? He looked fine. Okay, like solid 2 days to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think my biggest takeaway was just throughout the spring that he just looked better than Bailey Zappi. Like, I know that we came in being like, all right, there's going to be a quarterback competition. Like, Mac Jones isn't guaranteed the job. I know that Bailey Zappi even took a couple first-team reps on Tuesday, but like, it didn't look particularly close to me. Like, Bailey Zappi is still missing way more throws than Mac Jones is. Like, he's hesitating more. He's not as quick in the pocket. He's not as quick to get rid of the ball. Like, Mac Jones just clearly looked like the better quarterback to me.
Agreed. And honestly, you know, the number of words I've written, you've written, we've tweeted discussing all that. If you're talking about a quarterback controversy, you're looking for one. That's flatly it. And we include the Bailey Zappi starting reps because those happened. That's what it is. Our job is to report what we see, what we hear, what it means. But when you go through that period itself, yes, he was 5 for 5, all checkdowns, all flat throws. Not just like, somebody help me, I need an adult kind of throws. And that's fine because he was playing behind the offensive line we just detailed against what I think is going to be one of the most fun, if not one of the most dominant defenses in the entire league. Again, non-padded practices, more experience, the system's already installed, all of the spring qualifiers, blah, blah, blah. I don't care. They're building the whole damn plane out of safeties. And the 5th one is the guy that we talked about more than any of the 4 veterans in Marte Mapu, who I think in the caboose of the hype train that's rolling on, I don't want to miss the train as it rolls by, but I'm certainly not going to be at the head because we did this with Cameron Grone last year. But Mapu is coming along at linebacker and safety, stamp of approval from Belichick in the draft process. As I reported, he just loves him, and players are coming around to feel the same way. So you have between him and Jalen Mills and Adrian Phillips and Jabril Peppers and Kyle Duggar, this is so different from the Patriots defense of even 4 or 5 years ago. It is fast. It's rangy. There's a lot of playmaking all over the place. Am I missing anything here about this defense being just a ton of fun right away from week 1?
I think it will be. I like the idea of what they're doing at safety, where like anyone can be in any different role. You've got like, I thought one thing that was really interesting was what Jabril Peppers was saying yesterday of like, any of us can be in any different place. And then he said like, and then you throw Marte in there and he could be at linebacker or safety. It was like, it made it feel like Marte Mapu was like this super important part of the defense. That's going to allow them to be even more unpredictable to opposing offenses. So then I'll stop. And I will say that like, I'm someone who watched the Patriots pretty closely from 2008 or 9 until 2011, when the defense took a pretty significant downturn. They were trying to use Patrick Chung and Brandon McGowan and Brandon Merriweather and James Sanders in this split safety role, and everything went to hell. And they made the Super Bowl in 2011, but they also had like one of the worst defenses to ever make the Super Bowl. It was absolutely atrocious. And like, the other pieces then also weren't in place at that point, where their linebackers were rough, like everyone was getting old up front. So I think that structurally this defense is built a lot better. And I think that they do have better, more talented safeties to fill in for Devin McCourty, to play, too high, to have guys mixing around. At the same time, like, I just know how valuable having a good, dependable free safety is. And this idea of just like, yeah, I mean, we'll figure it out. Like Jabril Peppers was even saying, like, yeah, by training camp, we'll have a better idea of this and everything like that. I still don't see one particular player, unless it's Jonathan Jones, who has the speed and range of someone like Devin McCourty, who could handle being back there by himself. I'm just a little bit hesitant, because even like Jabril Peppers, he's one of those options. We heard him say yesterday, like, yeah, I played free safety as a rookie and it was like a huge learning curve, like wasn't very comfortable. Like, he didn't sound like a guy who wants to be playing free safety 80% of the time, or even 70% of the time. And I don't know who that guy is, because someone is going to have to be back there by themselves.
And the difficult part about this is we won't know, as much as I'm all in on how fun this defense will be. I think even for a defense that scored 7-8 touchdowns last year, and I don't think that's sustainable. Like, I'm not projecting them to be best in the league, but I think there's a lot of talent. And as Matthew Judon put, unicorns here that will make this a lot of fun. The trouble with replacing Devin McCourty is that you won't know until the bullets start flying in the regular season, because so much of the work that he did was in the unseen, like literally off your TV screen. He's so far back there, and that he's discouraging quarterbacks from throwing deep. He's throwing doubles or shades or brackets at certain receivers that force them to go the other way. And when you look at all the safeties that I just mentioned, you're right. None of them fit the typical free safety profile. But what the Patriots are banking on is that we can get away with 20% from Kyle Duggar back there, 15% from, Jabril Peppers, maybe another 15 from Adrian Phillips, 10 from Jonathan Jones, Jalen Mills, and name a player to figure out the rest. They might be right, but when you miss from that position, it is trouble. That we saw with Kyle Duggar. Third preseason game last year, blah, 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 preseason. He came up, took a bad angle, house call. The touchdown they allowed, similar situation in Miami, the season opener, gone, touchdown. So McCourty was so good at making those angles and those reads and those pre-snap calls. There's a lot of experience here, but when Jabril Peppers is talking about, I need to be more patient back there, that's a little bit of a red flag. Now, if they do play more too high, which we've seen the entire league really pivot towards the last couple of years, and you always want to be in the front end of these trends, never in the back end, which the Patriots would be, but if they can execute, mazel tov. Too high would alleviate some of those concerns. Then it comes up to the second level, where a lot of these guys are going to live anyway, alongside Juwan Bentley, who I think, and I've said this many times, quietly had an outstanding season last year, was the second best defender on this defense. I don't want to believe at that point. The other thing in giving me some sort of positivity towards this defense was the corner play. Spoiler alert, Jack Jones is a winner for me when we do winners and losers in a second. Did he make the cut for you?
He was on the post I made. Yeah, he was in there. Yeah.
So he was outstanding. Am I counting on a player some call Panda Jack, because once upon a time he robbed a Panda Express to be reliable when he gets suspended at the end of last season? No. Not exactly, but Christian Gonzalez looks the part, has fit in naturally. Again, we won't know until the bullets are flying. But between him, Jack Jones, and Jonathan Jones, and Jalen Mills, break in case of emergency at corner, I feel much better about this corner group than I did maybe 2 months ago.
Oh, yeah. No, 100%. Yeah. I mean, Christian Gonzalez looked the part out there. He wasn't really tested that often from what I saw, but just the fact that he can step in there right away and be a starting cornerback, I do think that's the best group. It would be, unless you move Jonathan Jones to free safety, which is something that I would still back if they did want like one guy permanently back there. But I think that your best combination is Christian Gonzalez and Jack Jones outside, Jonathan Jones inside. And then, like you mentioned, you got Jalen Mills, you got Marcus Jones. It's odd, the Marcus Jones thing, because in training camp last year, there was times when he was like the top slot cornerback. It was Jonathan Jones, and who else was outside? Jalen Mills
was outside then.
Jalen Mills and Jonathan Jones outside, and then Marcus Jones inside. But then last season, Marcus Jones basically only ever played outside. And then in some of the reps that we were watching this spring, Marcus Jones is still outside. And I don't know why they don't like him in the slot. He's 5'8", 175 pounds. So you don't necessarily want him outside. Maybe they don't trust his tackling ability yet from the slot right now. But I mean, he gets thrown in the mix as well. I think that, that's relatively deep. It's deep enough at the cornerback position when you can throw in a guy like maybe Joshua Bledsoe in the slot. I know Patriots fans don't like Miles Bryant, but I think that there's still some value that he could have in there as well. I thought that he had a pretty decent spring, just from what I could see. And I think that he's another guy who could play a little bit of safety for the Patriots as well. So yeah, I like the depth they've got there at cornerback a lot more than, like you mentioned, you did 2 months ago.
That brings us to the front. And this is not a front seven. It hasn't been a front seven for 6 or 7 years. Okay. This is a base nickel defense. They play more dime than the rest of the league. Again, it'll be a lot of 4 safety, 3 safety, and 3 corners. But up front, Matt Judon, Christian Barmore, Devon Godchow, Josh Uche. I'm ready for this team to take another step up from a pass rush when I think they set the Bill Belichick era record for most sacks in the season last year. And we're going to talk about Lawrence Guy. There's a mailbag question. He did not report. Minicamp wants a little bit more money, it seems. I still think this team will be led by the pass rush because while I do have confidence in Christian Gonzalez, and I do not think anything that he said to the media is any way an indication of any sort of mental weakness or lack of dog in him, because who cares what a 20-year-old says in his first big media scrum? He'll have time. Stephon Gilmore was a man of few words. The pass rush still needs to come through because this is a talented group. They need to complement one another. They played a ton of zone down the stretch of last season. They might feel more confident about playing man, but inevitably you're going to want to lean into some more cover 2 game plans like they played almost entirely against Cincinnati. Is there anything there that encouraged you, discouraged you? It felt like a quiet week or quiet 2 days. It was not a whole week, not even a half a week for Josh Uche. Judon had a sack on Tuesday. Barmore had a batted pass. Beyond that, we didn't see Keon White also who got hurt.
Right. Yeah. Keon White wasn't out there. And Keon White looked pretty good during OTAs. I would mention, I think that he'll be a part of that group as well. No, but I mean, I also just I have so much trouble, putting any value in defensive line or offensive line play during these sessions, just because it is unpadded. There's only so much that offensive linemen or defensive linemen are allowed to do against one another. So I don't know. My number one takeaway about just the edge and the front in general, and this is one that's been lingering for years. How much do you think Josh Uche actually weighs? Just Josh Uche is Josh Uche 230 pounds? Is he in the 220? Doesn't he just look so slim out there?
I didn't get that feeling this time around, but I know exactly what you're talking about. And I'm sure I talked about it with you. When he got drafted, his listed weight at the combine was 20 pounds different from what the Patriots listed at him. I was like, I know he's been in the building 3 months. He has not eaten everything in the cafeteria, including the chairs and the tables during his time here, because that's the only way he would add that kind of weight in that amount of time. But ultimately, Dietrich Wise is another name I haven't mentioned, which I think
he just keeps getting better.
Yeah, it just keeps getting better.
Yeah.
But you're right. There's not a ton to take from here. I would just think that the quiet day for Josh Uche, because this is a setting in which a player like him, small, athletic, not power-based, though he did deepen his repertoire, add a lot of tricks to his bag, should thrive a little bit more when you're facing Sidney Sow and Calvin Anderson and Riley Reef, and he didn't. I'm not raising any red flags. I'm not even moving my arms as I do here in the video for the YouTube folks, but it's just something I'm going to look at, because normally I would say contract year guy. He's improving coming off a career year. He really ate against the Colts and the Cardinals last year. You want to see more consistency, and that starts in the summer. Is there anything we got
back into coverage a couple times too out there? Which,
and look good. Had that. I think Mac Jones really should have been credited with that pass deflection, because he just led Mike Gesicki straight into Josh Uche's arms, and Josh Uche, knowing he can't make contact in this minicamp, it's backing away, going, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to," because Gesicki hit him straight on and went right to the ground. Are we missing anything here?
On defense, I don't think so. I think we'll get into some of it with the winners and losers too.
Yeah, and I would say, again, if you want more minicamp details, I have something close to 4,000 words at bostonherald.com. Doug has you completely covered from his Twitter feed and A2ZSports.com. So there's plenty more there we haven't discussed, because we already wrote about it. Rookies, I was going to say, we already kind of hit Christian Gonzalez. Keon White, we didn't see a whole lot of. Marte Mapu, I still want to see more from him there, the offensive lineman. I feel like we did rookie watch, even though it's next in the rundown. So let's just do winners and losers. Mine, Jack Jones and Mike Gesicki, big winners. I think it's pretty obvious. I think Mike Gesicki finished, looks like caught 9 of 10 targets from Mac Jones.
Yeah, Mike Gesicki was great out there. I mean, he was very heavily targeted. I was a little bit surprised, because sometimes guys have a harder time, I guess, acclimating to the Patriots offense. It didn't appear to be an issue whatsoever for Mike Gesicki. I know they're not putting everything out there right now, but I was just very surprised at how quickly he was able to acclimate, how good he looked right away. My two, I think I had like 5 or 6 winners in the column that I wrote today, but I agreed on Jack Jones and Mike Gesicki. They were both included in mine. I'm going to put out there Marte Mapu. And my other one would be Bill O'Brien, just because of the buy-in from everyone. And just like, this was the most obvious job for him to take to kind of regain his reputation. But with Mapu, since we haven't really talked about him that much yet, I'm very curious to see where he winds up. We did see him taking like free safety snaps during OTAs, part of minicamp. I think that would be a mistake personally, if they put him back there at free safety, and kind of in the same mold of like when Anthony Jennings was a rookie, the Patriots were trying to pigeonhole him into this role as an off-ball linebacker. And it never made sense to me because he was so solid as a run defender, so solid off the edge at Alabama. Like, moving this guy who probably runs like a 5'1" 40 to off-ball linebacker who can't run sideline to sideline, it just never made sense to me. They experimented with it. They ''moved him off of it, and he's been a pretty effective edge defender since then. That's kind of how I feel about this Mapu at free safety thing. Like, yeah, he's got great size at 6'3", 216. Like, he's a very instinctual player, but he's a guy that you want coming downhill. Like, one of his biggest strengths is just like the pop that he brings for his lack of size. It is his instincts. It's playing the box. It's not necessarily his range or his coverage ability. Like, he'll be a good coverage linebacker. I don't think he'll be a good coverage free safety. So hopefully, for the Patriots' sake, that's just them kind of experimenting, seeing where he can go. But all in all, like, he was making plays in OTAs. He was making plays in minicamp. He had an interception during OTAs, had a pass breakup in OTAs, had another pass breakup in minicamp. It was just the way that everyone on the team was talking about him, from Jawan Bentley to Jabril Peppers to Matthew Judon. Like they were all just absolutely raving about him. And I know that this is, I think, like, other people have kind of compared him to some other Patriots greats in the past, but like, just talking to him this week, and I don't want to glean too much off of talking to a player, and he really didn't have that much to say, but just like his mentality, like his seriousness, his smarts, it all just reminded me a little bit of Dante Hightower. And they're very different players. Like, Marte Mapu is not 6'3", 270 pounds or whatever the Dante Hightower was.
Well, Matt Judon said the same thing. You know?
Right. Like, I would not be surprised if 2-3 years down the road, like, Marte Mapu is the team leader on this defense. Like, is that go-to guy who's got that locker at the end of the locker room to make sure guys aren't leaving too early. Like, I think that that's the type of personality that he can bring to this team.
I'm glad we stopped on Mapu. I have less to add, obviously not being at OTAs, but hearing those quotes, reading the recaps that all of you had from those days and those practices was like, okay, this seems real. The reasons I have caution are partly that distinction between linebacker and safety, which really in New England, because of how often they play in the box, gets blurred. Like, just call it Adrian Phillips' spot or Patrick Chung's spot from 17 and 18, where he's at the second level. That's where he fits in. My question is, how long can you hang in there when you're only 221 pounds, 225 pounds? And I remember asking Belichick after they drafted him, like, do you see a way to add weight onto his frame? And they got the, we'll see. So we will see, because the other part that gives me pause is, what is his path to playing time? And I'm not saying he needs to play 50% of the snaps to make an impact. You don't in this defense. You can play a very specialized dime linebacker role, maybe, which was another weird small detail, that they had a lot of Bentley with Mack Wilson, which was interesting. The first team defense on Tuesday running with the dime group. Anyway, because if he's playing that, Adrian Phillips, Kyle Duggar, Jabril Pepper spot, even if they're rotating to play free safety occasionally, is he going to play ahead of any of them? Is he going to play ahead of Jalen Mills? You're going to have an injury probably to that group at some point. But I'm not sure where, as impressive as he's been, and I think partly, and I think it was Jabril Peppers was talking about this, he sees the plays conceptually. Like, he gets all the responsibilities and assignments, how the pieces fit. And that's probably how the Patriots just coach defense. That's impressive. It doesn't mean on 3rd and 7, I'm taking him over Jabril Peppers, who seems to get it and have much improvement this season. So that's partly why I still want to see more of the Pats come on. I don't think he'll disappoint, though. Daniel Jeremiah called him his favorite player in the draft. As I've said, Belichick loved him, and they picked him. So he's here, and he's off to a great start.
Absolutely. No, I don't have that much more to add. I think that I don't know. It feels like there's a role for him, even if he just takes the snaps that Mac Wilson and Raekwon McMillan did last year. And then also maybe you mix him in a little bit in that safety group, like maybe take some snaps off Adrian Phillips, whatever it is. I don't know. One way or the other, I don't know. It's weird. I just have a good feeling about him. Maybe it winds up being completely false, but like it just seemed to be like the Marte Mapu like hype train basically all spring.
Yeah. One last thing in Gesicki, who I mentioned is my second winner here for this week. He, like Josh Uche, should have and did thrive in this kind of setting. Again, no pads, there's no running. His blocking it's you can't really even file it under blocking for other tight ends. He is a big receiver. That said, a lot of flat routes, drags. He got some screens. He's familiar with, I don't think he ever played in the Bill O'Brien offense. Was recruited by Bill O'Brien to Penn State, didn't play under him. Also now connecting with his old college quarterback. I covered both of them. Trace McSorley is now the third string. James Franklin was there. Really worlds colliding for 2018. Andrew Callahan coming from Penn State to the Patriots. I think it's a good start. I still want to see more. It'll be interesting to see how they use what's a very effective player, but Mike Gesicki is very limited. He's got a couple of notes that he plays. He plays them every time you go out to see him on the show or on stage. And then he gets off. So we'll see. Losers for me, Kendrick Bourne, 2 targets on Tuesday, not a single catch. One of those targets resulted in an interception. He had 5 catches on Monday. 2 were on screens. So you want to see a little more when you're dominating first team reps. And then offensive tackle depth, because it just is what it is right now without Trent Brown. And that's not even a reflection totally on Riley Reif and Calvin Anderson and Connor McDermott. It's just the team letting that happen.
Mine, I mean, I think, Bourne would have liked to have seen more out of that, especially with the wide receiver depth so limited. The offensive tackle depth, I had Trent Brown as one of mine. But like I said, like, what are the Patriots going to do? Like, they still have to put him out there. But I would put Tyquan Thornton in there, just because, I don't know. It's like, he's a second-year player, and this is already the 3rd injury that he's dealt with during his Patriots career. Like, he had the clavicle
soft
injury.
Tissue as well, which they do not take kindly to because they see it as a hydration issue in training.
Right, and like, if they sign DeAndre Hopkins, like, what's Tyquan Thornton's path for snaps at that point? Like, it's if it's a 21 personnel, then it's gonna be Mike Gesicki, Hunter Henry, DeAndre Hopkins, and Juju Smith-Schuster. If it's 11 personnel, then Thornton is still competing with Devontae Parker, Kendrick Bourne, all these other guys for snaps in there. So I don't know. This is a time when it would have been really valuable for him to kind of, continue on the trajectory that he had in that first open OTAs practice when he looked really good, but then he just disappears. So that's not great. Other one, I wrote today, it felt like punching down. It probably was. Riley Webb, he was on the roster last year. He's listed as a wide receiver. Maybe he's like he's a future Matthew Slater, where he's listed as a wide receiver and doesn't actually play it, but like, he actually played wide receiver for the Ravens last year in preseason. They had him out there catching passes. He was probably catching about 50% of passes. Like, I in my recollection of watching a lot of OTAs, a lot of minicamp, a lot of training camp ever since, 2012, 2013, whatever it was, I cannot recall a player dropping as many passes in individual drills as I did with Raleigh Webb. I'm sure he's a nice guy. Like I said, maybe he's going to be a future All-Pro as a special teamer, but you would like to see a little bit better hands out of a guy who could even maybe serve as like an emergency wide receiver option.
I had him actually in my duds category of Tuesday practice recap and pulled him out because it did feel like punching down. But you're in it. Look, grand scheme of things, minicamp OTAs do not matter. If that comes from the players and the coaches, you want to put in good work, but the results in the field do not carry over to even July, let alone September and October. That said, the troubling part for me about Raleigh Webb, who, for folks who don't remember, the Patriots, I believe, signed off the Ravens practice squad last year, core special teamer, when they lost Cody Davis. If Cody Davis comes back, here's their core special teams: Matthew Slater, Cody Davis, Brendan Schooler, Chris Board, DeMarcus Mitchell, and maybe Amir Speed.
Right.
Slater, Board, Schooler, and Mitchell, because Cody Davis was limited this week, were on all 4 coverage units, or all 4 special teams units that we saw Monday and Tuesday in minicamp. Those are the core guys. They're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
Where does Raleigh Webb fit in? And especially in a league now where the kickoff has been devalued.
Yeah.
Do you have room for a guy like that? I would think most Patriots fans are listening going, no, please, God, no, Michael Scott Giff.
Yes.
And as you mentioned, when you can't catch the ball, that's going to work against you. So yeah, right now I would have Riley Webb far on the outside looking in. Okie doke, on to the mailbag. Let's lead it off with Cam. He wants to know, what are the chances the Patriots look to make a tackle trade before the season starts? I would say look 1,000%. Actually strike a deal. It depends on how bad it gets in camp, right?
Yeah, I mean, teams don't want to trade tackles. Like I love the idea of it. Like, yeah, absolutely trade for a tackle. And yeah, like you said, I'm sure the Patriots will look, but I just like teams aren't going to want to trade tackles, especially not in training camp. Like last year, tackle depth got so limited that like guys were being plucked off practice squads and everything like that. I could certainly foresee that happening again. I think the more likely scenario is that maybe they sign another veteran free agent. That maybe if, we'll see what happens with Riley Reif, but like, I don't know if any of these guys are the best options, but like Taylor Lewan is still out there. Eric Fisher is still out there. Jason Peters is still out there. Like maybe you can't get 17 games out of some of these guys, but I don't know. Like if you're desperate, then there are still guys who have started in the league out there as free agents.
Well, that answers Megan's question, who wanted to know if TJ Fluker was the only option available in the free agent market. So that is a veteran expert move by you. Yeah, I would suggest the same thing. I think part of this too, as much as we talk about, Riley Reif is on the second team now, what does that mean? Right. That happened. We report it. We look at it. They might have just said, okay, we're very confident you playing right tackle. Let's give you the backup reps at left tackle because given the guarantees in his contract, which were not exorbitant, he's making the team. They believe in Riley Reif, and they believe in the culture he's going to help enforce in a way that Isaiah Wynn was actually detracting from for most of last season, in a very material way. Those were media interactions that I cared about and thought said something, and they did. Now, Riley Reif had a sneaky good end of last season playing for the Chicago Bears. I think that's replicable. I don't know. I'm not thinking Riley Reif, but that's something we should mention here, is that I think they believe in the guys they have. It's not. It could very well be as bad as we expect it and see it, and I think that's likely, but the Patriots seem to disagree. All right, Fuad wants to know, what does this roster still need to be able to make a legit run to the playoffs and maybe more?
DeAndre Hopkins. I mean,
back to where we started. You're right, though. I agree.
I mean, right? Like, I don't know if he makes them a Super Bowl contender, but I think like even earlier in the offseason, like there was some conversation of like, what is this Patriots team? What are they aiming for? Like, how can they actually compete in the AFC East? And I think that signing DeAndre Hopkins would probably be that next step at this point. They had a solid, if not unspectacular, free agency period, but I think that a player like Hopkins, like you sign Juju Smith-Schuster, you draft Christian Gonzalez, and if you sign DeAndre Hopkins, those are some major needs that ultimately you're filling. And then you throw in Bill O'Brien and hope for Mac Jones improvement and everything like that. Then you're at least competitive in the AFC East, and maybe you are a playoff team at that point. Other than that, like, I don't think that that guy would be out there other than Hopkins who could actually like make a serious difference on this roster.
Right. The available moves, the likely moves, the moves we're discussing, it's Hopkins and that's it. It's a totally separate conversation if you want to fire up the theoretical NFL trade machine and look at tackles, which again, every team is looking for quality tackles. You are not giving them away. So that's a move that they could make, but is not worth any more time than we've already spent discussing.
The Jonah Williams thing could be interesting at some point. That's one name I would throw out there. Jonah Williams for the Bengals. Like, I know that I don't know where that stands right now, but like theoretically, if someone would be available, like maybe he would, and then maybe that's a move they could make. But beyond that, no.
Right. My other point about this, because Hopkins is my answer, and you could add another tackle, and that's about it, is that the ceiling for this team will be set by the players that are already on the roster, and specifically the players in years 1 through 3. And I said this last year, that the young players in the roster would take this team as far as they could go. And we could look back and go, well, Marcus Jones was an all-pro returner. Jack Jones had a pretty good run, at corner. Cole Strange was a starter. Cole Strange got benched in a couple of games. Right. Tyquan Thornton played more snaps than most receivers and really didn't do anything with them. No. You go back to 2021, Christian Barmore got hurt, didn't really make an impact. Mac Jones regressed, even if it wasn't his fault. Bonnie Perkins never played. Ramondre Stevenson was great. Imagine, though, if Barmore had stayed healthy. Imagine if Tyquan Thornton had made an impact, or Cole Strange. had done so. Now take all of those and put it into 2023. Cole Strange, year 2 leave. Tyquan Thornton, year 2 leave. Your rookies, Christian Gonzalez starts. Like, that's where this season is either going to exceed expectations or bottom out again because of the development of those particular players. Not only because young players are important and they're cost controlled and they provide good value, but whether it's a quarterback in Mac Jones, a corner in Christian Gonzalez, a pass rusher in Christian Barmore, these are premium positions the Patriots are counting on. So that's, if you want to make a legitimate run or surprise in the playoffs, it's going to be through those players more than even DeAndre Hopkins, I would argue, at this point in the season.
Yeah. No, I mean, Barmore's a huge one. Like, if Barmore can play up to his potential, then that'll be massive for the Patriots.
Yeah. All right. On to the coaching staff. Gary wants to know, the team took some, quote, unconventional steps this offseason to keep Gerard Mayo. Then everyone, meaning probably Belichick, kind of downplayed it after he resigned, with this being his first return to action, I think meaning practice.
Yeah.
Did you notice any differences with Gerard or any indications that his role has changed?
I didn't personally. I'm curious to see what you noticed.
I didn't at all. I think he's more or less running the show aside from calling the plays on defense. I think his role has not gone unchanged. I think he's being involved more, as we saw with the coaching search for offensive coordinators and offensive position coaches. He's had things open up to him in a way that maybe they weren't before with Belichick. And I think he has greater sway, and I think he's being paid a lot more because this is a guy that had outside interests that sometimes is, teams needing to check the Rooney Rule box, unfortunately. But the word is out on Gerard Mayo being an outstanding coach. So as far as what you can expect on game days or to hear from him, no. But I think he's in a much more secure place, is being allowed into rooms where those doors were closed before, and is being paid a lot more. And kind of an understanding he's going to be Bill's successor, even if it's not said outright.
What'd you make of, Belichick was asked about the whole Gerard Mayo contract announcement thing. I think Belichick said, like, ask someone else about the contract. Like, was that kind of a shot at Robert Kraft? Like, what, that was a little odd, right?
It was, but I remember checking in on that right when it happened. And my understanding was Bill and Robert looked over it and okayed it. And so whether it was Bill just saying, F it, I don't care, I'm going then that weekend to New Orleans, or it was something that he took more care of. I think Gerard and Bill have an understanding that, like, what Bill says to the media just is not reflective of anything that's going on behind closed doors. It just doesn't care. And Gerard doesn't care. Gerard cares about what's important, and that's coaching, how much is being paid, and what the future holds for him in New England. So I don't make too much of it. Would I think that Bill would have done that release on his own? No, of course not. But I think Gerard's in a much better place, and that place, as far as it impacts the team's success and his contributions, isn't all that different.
Is it odd that they made the announcement that they were looking to sign him to a long-term deal, and then they never made an announcement that they did?
So weird. Everything was weird about it. I remember being on the phone with someone who was like, this is Robert Kraft, and they just started laughing. Like, what the hell is going on? Mind you, after a season in which that was the only question we asked all year. It's 18 weeks, 17 games. What the hell is going on? And then we got that announcement. Yeah, it was very strange.
Like, why never make the announcement that it's complete? I don't know. I'm getting probably because but it was just very strange.
I think Robert Kraft had more involvement in those first couple of weeks in the season when Bill's leverage or his place or his standing, like, he had to swallow a little bit more than he normally would, right? And then as Robert gets his way and you go deeper into the offseason turnaround and making changes, and Bill's a little bit more hands-on, that's when we're going to do things my way. If it got signed, that's what matters. Screw the rest in the public. But for the moment where the Patriots needed to have kind of an image rebound there in those next couple of weeks, that's when Robert stepped in, because that image is so much more important to him, obviously, than it is Bill.
Right. No. Yeah, that was it's very strange.
All right, last one. Los Patriots, all of the Spanish Patriots want to know, do you expect the Lawrence Guy situation to be resolved, or is it more likely that they just part ways with him? Also, who on the roster would fill his spot, or would it be a signing? Okay, so let's split these up. Do you expect it to be resolved, or do you expect Lawrence Guy to be wearing a different uniform come week 1 or 2 next season?
I don't think they're going to I don't think the Patriots should do anything about this. Like, I feel bad for Lawrence Guy in saying that, but, like, what's the market for a 33, 34-year-old defensive tackle if they were to say, okay, we'll release you? Like, is he really going to make more money? Like, I think he's he can make up to $3.5 million or something like that this year with per game roster bonuses and his salary and everything like that. Like, I feel for Lawrence Guy. I think he's probably, he's a very valuable player, but like an early down, older run stuffing defensive tackle, like look at the deals that Ndamukong Suh and who else was it?
In Philly?
Yeah, in Philly. Was it was it Dalvin Tomlinson also? Was he the other one?
No,
No.
I'm gonna look this up because it's bothering me, but keep going.
But like they did not sign big deals, and like those are players who are around the same age as Lawrence Guy who can make a little bit more of an impact on passing down. So like I don't think this is necessarily going to be a great approach by Lawrence Guy. I think I would expect them to just be like come to training camp or lose out on money. Like I don't really think that there's much recourse that the Patriots need to take on this one. I think I expect him to stick around. But he's just probably gonna have to eat it, I think, unfortunately for him.
Linval Joseph.
Yeah, that's who it was. Yeah.
Former Viking. Maybe that's where Dalvin Tomlinson came.
That was where Dalvin Tomlinson came.
Yeah, I'm with you. I was thinking about this too in reading Mike Reese's story because Mike reported on this.
Yeah.
I think there was a mention in there about either a desire to change agents or Lawrence actually changed agents looking to affect some change, but he doesn't really have any leverage here. And it sucks that he had a difficult negotiation supposedly for the 4-year deal he signed in 2021, and he's got no guarantees left, and he's won a community award and was voted a team captain.
Yeah.
This is part of being on the Patriots is they play hardball with everyone. There is no, we'll do you a favor to the agent, which is something I wanted to mention actually with the Hopkins visit to Tennessee, because it's part of this, right? Like there are more people involved than just Hopkins wanting to sign with the team.
Right.
But as far as Lawrence Guy is concerned, yeah, like it sucks. I would think they release him, maybe bring him back before he finds any sort of outside interest. Not only just a 33-year-old guy, but not real impact player as a pass rusher.
No.
Entering his 12th season, his best football is definitely behind him. And the market is just never that great for interior defensive tackles. And he does more than that. He'll kick out to the 5 technique sometimes when they play rare snaps at base and all these different things. It's just they replace him with Carl Davis, who had an offsides penalty. That was his big moment in minicamp, but Carl's been effective in like 15-20% of the snaps. I think they would sign someone else off the street because this is just a position that's, there are only X amount of people walking the planet who are 320 or more pounds, but most of them like NFL football, I think. So I think the Patriots could find someone who that is. I mean, I have been mocking players to the Patriots in the 6th or 7th round at this position at that weight forever. And they just won't pick anybody. And I'm like, they're right there. And then they get signed off the Packers practice squad or signed in Minnesota. I'm like, there's that guy. Go get him. They might actually do it now if Lawrence Guy, who I mentioned a couple episodes ago, is a surprise cut candidate because of his contract and his age and all the things we just talked about. They would need to replace him though. And that is a difference, even starting week 1 against Philadelphia in that run game, that they would feel his absence and someone we would need to step in. I just don't think you convince the Patriots that that's a problem they need to solve right now. No,
I mean, like Ndamukong Suh and Linval Joseph are still free agents. They signed for like $2.2 million last year. I mean, like Michael Brockers is a free agent. Akeem Hicks is a free agent. Like those guys around that same age are free agents right now for a reason. And they're probably not going to sign for $3.5 million or whatever it is that Lawrence Guy could wind up making. And I don't know. I mean, they've got pretty decent defensive line depth right now with a guy, if he comes back around, Godshaw, Michael Christian Barmore, Daniel Quale, Carl Davis. Like they've got a lot of guys in there. And yeah, they probably would have to bring in one more guy to fill in for Lawrence Guy. I was doing that unintentionally, but there we go. It works. But yeah, I don't know. I like you said, like I was looking at him as being a potential cut candidate this spring and this winter. I certainly was not expecting him to hold out for a new contract. Like that would have been like the last thing I would have expected.
I almost made a joke about it when we finished doing attendance on Monday. I mean, like, oh, can you not believe Lawrence Guy is holding out for more money? And not because I think he's a player who doesn't deserve more. That's not what I'm
he's
saying.
A good player, good guy. Yeah.
In speaking with him so often and how he puts the team first, and every player should get their value. It just was surprising that of all the players, their personality, their impact, that he would sit out mandatory minicamp and go against the rules. But business is business. The Patriots are handling it exactly as such. Lawrence is going to do the same. Hopefully they can find a resolution, even if it's just a couple incentives added to his contract, because they've been open to that in the past with different players. But Yeah, we will see. If he is gone, I will very much miss the little used nickname I once gave him, Larry the Tackle Guy, because it is just so fitting for our friend Lawrence. Okay. This episode of the Pats Interference Podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. One last message from me, because I know Doug won't do it on his own, but please, if you have time or any resources, please donate to the GoFundMe ongoing for his 2-year-old daughter, Hallie, who is battling leukemia. She is a fighter. She is a sweetheart. There are updates there about her care. Doug has been going back and forth from his home south of Foxboro to the hospital, all the way and back. It's unfortunate he can't listen to this episode because I thought this went great because you were on it. But if you have the time, please go read about Hallie. Give some money to the cause. Her care is ongoing. It's so crucially important. And I've not met Hallie, but if she's anything like Olivia, your older daughter, who is freaking awesome, I know that she deserves the world from the hospital and the care from all of us. So if you have a chance, please check out the GoFundMe. It would mean a lot to me personally.
Appreciate that, Andrew. And yeah, no, Hallie's doing well. She's a fighter, like you said. Just got an update from my wife that she's dancing around and having fun. So yeah, look forward to going back to the hospital tomorrow to see her.
We'd love to see it. All right. Well, I hope everyone listening has a good summer. We'll have a couple more episodes and then take a little break around the 4th of July because I'm just a slacker. I'll be honest. I didn't go on a wedding or a honeymoon or anything like that. I just needed a break from this podcast. No, we'll have bold predictions, lots more fun. I think the season is going to be a lot more entertaining and enjoyable, even if the result 8-9, 9-8 is the same. There's a lot to look forward to. The Patriots, I don't know, turning a corner. It'll be new wherever we head. It should be a fun year.
Definitely.
Thanks, Doug.
Thank you.